Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Global Journalism series at the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism. I'm Mira Selva, Director of the Journalist Fellowship Programme here, and I'm really delighted to have with us here Sophia Smith Galer. She is a kind of TikTok content creator extraordinaire. I've never seen anything quite like it. She has over 3.7 million views on her videos, and she was voted a voice of change in the 2020 TikTok 100. She is just 26 years old. She's been with the BBC for 3.5 years, but why we have invited Sophie here is as an example of a new generation of journalists really harnessing social media to tell their stories, create new narratives, reach new audiences. So Sophie, thanks so much for joining us today, and over to you.
Thank you, Mira. It's Sophia, not Sophie. Easy mistake that a lot of people make. So I just want to make that clear before we get started. Thank you so much for having me today. Just a little bit of housekeeping. My internet isn't the greatest, but hopefully it will see us through. If I pop out for a minute, don't worry, Zoom will kick me straight back in. So just bear with me. And also, I'm just going through a bit of some like jaw pain issues at the minute. So I'm really sorry if I sound a little different to how I usually do, but it's all fine. We're ready now to take on what I hope you think is an interesting topic. I assume that you'll have signed up to watch this because you think that TikTok is a worthwhile arena for us as journalists to probe, interrogate, find stories on and share stories on as well. So what I'll do now, I will share the screen and we'll get started. First of all, a little bit about me to kind of understand where my interest in TikTok began. So I currently have 168,000 followers on the platform, which is very much not the following that I have on other platforms or had before I got on TikTok. This time last year, I think I had maybe certainly a few thousand followers on TikTok. I only had about 2,000 on Twitter. Maybe 1,000 on Instagram. I'm not sure. My Instagram following's gone up to 10k now, and on my Twitter, I'm at nearly 20k, and that's all been part of the impact of my TikTok journalism too. I have 3.7 million likes, and the reason that that number is important is because when you see people with high followings on TikTok, it's really important to ratio that with how many likes the videos actually get. You want to see a nice, healthy, high ratio because it tells you that this content really is important to people. It isn't just a question of the videos go viral, but they have little value. Healthy ratios shows that the videos have high value for viewers on the platform. I'm really lucky that I was selected as one of the top 100 UK creators, and TikTok divided these top creators into sort of different lists, and I was in the Voices for Change, which was really exciting. Max Foster at CNN, who I will mention many times today, I'm sure is another excellent British journalist who's on TikTok, and interestingly, he was put in the one of the top educators on TikTok. So it's interesting to see where TikTok itself has kind of aligned us in its own rating. But that's not my day job. My day job is that I am a BBC journalist. I've been at the BBC since May 2017, I think. Thinking it feels like a really long time ago, pre-pandemic world. But my first job was as a social media producer for BBC.com. I created social media content and wrote feature articles for BBC Future and BBC Culture, which had global facing audiences at the BBC, part of the BBC's commercial arm. And then I got my current job, which is as visual journalist in faith and ethics for the BBC World Service. And all visual journalist means is that I make video, I'm a VJ, but I may also sometimes make Instagram content, that's still photography, and a variety of other things. I've kind of gone beyond the remit of that role in my job. I spend a lot of time making documentaries, and I've now made both radio and television documentaries for the BBC. What do I do on TikTok? I divide it. So I see myself as doing two different things on there. I create content and I do journalism. Sometimes it's a Venn diagram and I do both at the same time. But it's really important to kind of caveat this whole talk with, I only really called myself a TikTok journalist when I started making a documentary about TikTok, which I'll talk about soon. It was really the journalism industry that were very quick to call me a TikTok journalist or journalist TikToker. It wasn't really something that I called myself or thought of myself to be. I was just a VJ who in my spare time was having a bit of fun on there, talking about my job or talking about my love of languages. I studied Spanish and Arabic at uni, and TikTok for me has been a really handy way to connect with Arabic and Spanish speakers and to practice my languages, which I don't get to do every day at work. And it's been a chance to share music that I like, songs that I learned during my vocal training that I went through at school, because I was going to become a classical singer for several years, long before I dreamed of a career in journalism. So I had a bit of a career change. And obviously I'm on there as a consumer. I'm on there as someone who watches, joy scrolls through TikTok on a daily basis. And then I do some journalism on there as well. So I have done a couple of investigations into things that I've seen on the platform. I've used TikTok as a news gathering tool. So I either already have an idea of a story, or I just spend time on the For You page scrolling, hoping to find something of interest. And I use it to promote my work. So if I have a new documentary out or new video out, I will use it to share and try and get more people to consume that BBC content. Really, really happily, Professor Charlie Beckett raised me in a select committee about the future of journalism, which was a big career highlight. So thank you. And he said, I've included the bit that he said about me, which is that I'm doing terrific and really clever stuff on TikTok. He says, I do not think TikTok is the solution to the news media's problem, but it is a good example of her using the technology, and she has done it in an entrepreneurial, editorial way. And I've included this because what he said about, I don't think it's the solution to the news media's problem. And I agree with him. I don't think it is either. But it's certainly an excellent way to reach out to people who are under 25 and under 30, I would say, largely. If content on other social media platforms may find that it struggles to reach those audiences, but TikTok simply just has such a high penetration of users in that young age demographic that you're sort of silly not to somehow have a presence on there if you want your stories to reach that audience. Here's a little overview of some of the pieces that I've done. This story came out in March, where I was already, I think I probably would have had maybe 50,000 followers on TikTok at that point. So it wasn't huge, but I wasn't a complete nobody either. And I found Rachel Leary's video using the BBC News theme, raving to it. And I spotted it at about 400,000 views, which is big on TikTok, but obviously it still has the potential to go even more viral than that. And I tweeted it, and my tweet, I don't know how many millions of times it's been watched now, but it's certainly been seen at least 1 million times on Twitter. And there was sort of so much media fuss around it as everyone was celebrating the BBC News theme tune. It ended up becoming a BBC News story, and then it became a trend on TikTok, using the hashtag in other news that was used on the Discover page. That would not be the first time or the last time I was on the Discover page. I've now been on there quite a few times. These two stories are just examples of me taking a community that's emerged on TikTok. These are by no means new communities, but their digital expressions are quite interesting and new. And the way that TikTok can very speedily gather a community together in a way that other social media platforms aren't really doing right now, brought these two really interesting stories up. One about how, as the pandemic, was prompting lockdown measures around the world in June, and virtual like pride parades were cancelled. A really entrepreneurial young woman created a virtual pride, and it became a huge movement on TikTok. So I covered that. For Hanukkah, you know, I don't think the BBC ever before for a Hanukkah story has covered like a digital expression of faith for it per se. So that's what I did this year, looking at the Jewish content creators who were really working hard to create a moment for Hanukkah on the app. Back in April, I found this story, which was all because I spend a lot of time on the For You page, just scrolling and scrolling through content, and a video from a very colorist trend landed on my For You page. I was like, how is this on my page? And then the minute I went through the comments, I could see that lots of people had reported the video. They were saying, why is this video still up? And so I gathered all of the problematic videos that were taking part in this trend. I spoke to TikTok users who are upset about it, and then I brought the trend to TikTok's attention. And then TikTok ended up taking them down and apologizing. This is probably my career highlight so far. This happened during the US election. The light that I was sort of shedding on TikTok at the BBC actually led, for the first time in my life, I didn't really have to work hard to pitch something. And editors kind of came to me saying, we really like the sound of this, can you make this for us? So I made an hour-long radio documentary that I produced and presented on how TikTok was being used in the US election. And I was also asked to make a television version, which I did, filmed by Chris Alcock. And when I first got the commission, I really genuinely thought, oh, this will be quite exploratory, kind of an exposition of how, a case study of when there's an election in a country, how do its young people use TikTok? And does that have any impact on the election? I did not necessarily suspect I would find what I ended up finding out, which were 2 exclusives that I delivered to the BBC. I was the first reporter to notice the Biden and Trump campaigns were on TikTok by proxy, significant especially from Trump's side because he made banning TikTok a part of his electoral campaign. So I managed to find out that while he was trying to ban it, his campaign was simultaneously using a TikTok hype house to gather votes. I also found that TikTok users were being paid, and like I'm talking big content creators, were being paid to create content to persuade people to vote. And some of these videos were partisan, which breaks TikTok guidelines on which bands paid for political content. So that was another story that I found, and I'm really, really proud of them. And I had great support as well from the BBC tech desk, who, when I brought these stories to them, they were like, yeah, you know, we need to tell these stories, they're important, especially to young people on TikTok. Not only about storytelling, I try and innovate how to promote stories or use TikTok as a platform to kind of gain a bit more traction. So in the top left, this is a still from the television documentary. I used, and this featured in the radio doc as well, but I used the duet feature on TikTok to vox pop. There's nothing revolutionary about a vox pop. It's been done for a really long time, but it's not necessarily been done much on TikTok. But as you can see, I had the radio mic there so that people really felt like they were being interviewed. Because it's nice to feel special and interviewed. So that's how I did it. And I just did the video saying, hey, I'm making a documentary about how TikTok's being used ahead of the US election. I've got a few questions if you want to answer them. And people found the video and people answered them. And I got enough for really good answers for my doc. So that really worked well for me. I also did a kind of spoken word rap thing, which is huge on TikTok. And that got over 150,000 views. And it also in the comments got the attention of like top creators on TikTok who accessed my documentary and listened to it. So that was a real win for me as well. For anyone who has seen that video, because it did the rounds on Twitter as well, because people were saying, wow, this is a cool way to tell the news on TikTok. In terms of turnaround, I came up with a rap, performed it. I think it took 6 or 7 takes, subtitled it, published it, all within the space of about 2 hours. And that's because it came to me quite quickly. I wrote it out, and then it was like, right, now I just have to film it. Obviously, there are times where I've come up with kind of spoken word things like that, and it might take longer. Just depends sort of the creative mood that I'm in. I did another one about abstinence-only education randomly a few weeks ago, which also did quite well. And here, admittedly, he wasn't sharing the BBC News story, but this is Donald Trump Jr. sharing my story. So maybe President Trump himself read the story, you know. Isn't it just another social media platform? What is all the fuss about TikTok? Why should we care? Well, this is why I think we should care. There is an enormous potential for viral reach. Never with any other content on any other social media platform in my career at the BBC has my content gone this viral and has it got so many followers. Something that I speak about in the TikTok documentary is with Josh Constein, an excellent contributor that I had, who talks about high content density. Videos on TikTok range from anything from a couple of seconds to 60 seconds. And every moment every second is highly saturated with content. It's all about making you think and feel with every second of content. And you need to have been made to think and feel within a second of viewing, otherwise you will scroll straight past. We talk about books as page turning. I think of my videos when I make them as thumb stopping. How are you going to make, as someone is scrolling through TikTok, how are you going to make their thumb hover in the air at your video, move it away and watch the whole thing? That's another interesting thing about TikTok. I find very, very high viewing, like engagement rates with my videos. People do generally watch the whole thing, because when you know that the videos are pretty short, you do sit and end up watching a lot of them. It's a very different viewing habit to what we are now accustomed to with longer video platforms like Facebook, even Instagram sometimes, and YouTube. Though production value, I've made the vast majority of my TikToks just in my room. I have a ring light to help light, because lighting is important. That's what's lighting me right now. But other than that, you don't really need much. There are some people who may use a Canon or a nice camera, but there are plenty who don't, including myself. I just use my phone most of the time. There is an extremely high user base under 25. The gross proportion of my own followers on TikTok are women aged 18 to 24. That is an age demographic that certainly organisations like the BBC and basically every news provider are desperate to try and reach. Well, they're on TikTok. I like to think of TikTok as the app where there's a high saturation of Gen Z users. And then if we think about Instagram, high saturation of millennials, and Facebook, again, each time the generations are getting that bit older, but it doesn't mean that there aren't some, people of all generations mix in and around the three of them. Really high comment value. This is something that I've noticed with TikTok, that I get vastly different comments to what I get on Instagram and Twitter. And actually my TikTok comments have started influencing my, sorry, I'm going to close my email because they're going to keep being noisy. Okay. High comment value. So I just get generally really, really lovely comments on TikTok. It's not at all the kind of nasty, bitter comments that I think we're getting quite used to seeing on apps like Twitter and certainly on Facebook. When I go through the comments of a lot of my BBC videos, perhaps because my content's about religion, I'm exposed to people's, I guess, xenophobia, perhaps more often than people who make other sort of genres of journalism, if that makes sense. And you obviously get some of that on TikTok, but you get markedly less of that on TikTok, 100%. That's something that may change, but for now, I do find it to be like a far healthier comment section space to be on, far happier place. And lastly, it's a culture maker through its trends. We can't really say that things happening organically out of Instagram and Facebook are becoming so viral that they impact content everywhere on all social media platforms. They become moments for us to rally around. The most recent example being like sea shanty TikTok. This sea shanty moment just wouldn't have happened if it started on Instagram or Facebook or maybe even YouTube. Like, it had to happen on TikTok because it so rapidly catapults entertaining content to so many people so quickly that it ends up creating these moments. And the other thing is that it's color by numbers. With its trends, it has made content creation immensely accessible for people who probably never made content before. So it's turning more people in general into content creators, giving you the idea to make content without you having to generate yourself, which is, as a content creator, one of the most challenging things, really, to maintain a constant flurry of ideas for your audience. Something I wanted everyone to think about today is if journalists can be influencers, and at least that's something that I get asked quite a lot. And actually, no, I don't think that's how we should be looking at it at all. We should be looking at it as if we are content creators. And the reason that I make a big distinction between the two are the following. It's all in the semantics. So an influencer is very different to a content creator. The definition of an influencer is that it's a person paid by a company to show and describe its products and services on social media, encouraging other people to buy them. Content creation is completely different. It's someone who contributes in to any media, especially digital media, for an audience in specific contexts. If I think of my own career, for example, at the BBC, where I have created, you could call it journalism, but you could also call it content. I've created content for Radio 4, BBC 3, BBC Breakfast, BBC World Service, any which one program, BBC Outside Source. It's all content going out to lots of different outlets. And it's, again, content that gets reversioned and moved around. And certainly if we think about, if you take it from a BBC perspective at, plans of news restructure and whether we can tell stories based from story teams rather than program teams. The idea is that story teams produce content and then it goes out to lots of different programs rather than, say, an idea originating with one program and then it not really necessarily going to a number of outlets. I think that journalists now, we're so used to hosting a number of social media profiles, also contribute, obviously writing for, filming for, radioing for, whoever it is we work for. We're so used to reversioning content without even realizing it most of the time, that I think we'd all do well to think of ourselves as content creators. And once you think of yourself as that, being on TikTok doesn't seem remotely novel, doesn't seem remotely challenging. It's simply just like another sort of tentacle of what it is that we do. In terms of journalists who are already on TikTok, I've laid 3 out here, which I think give really good, from these 3 journalists, you can get a pretty good perspective of the kind of journalists who are on TikTok and what it is that they are doing. Again, big caveat. Just because a journalist is on TikTok does not mean that they are doing journalism there. The gross proportion of my videos are not anything necessarily to do with journalism, but a few are. Someone like Megan Mitchell, who is a news anchor, her videos aren't about, she doesn't do journalism on there, she doesn't news gather on there, she doesn't even necessarily promote her stories, but she does talk about the reality of being a queer news anchor. something that has gained her a lot of followers. She's become a really inspiring person for people who long to see more queer visibility on TV and on the news. And she shows the behind the scenes of her life, which I think, if we're thinking about how we can build trust with our audiences, that's something that she's done really well by showing the behind the scenes and personal side of her career. You've got Max Foster, who does share daily news on TikTok. He cleverly uses audio memes to take hold of a viral moment and adapt it for storytelling and sharing daily news. So his stuff is kind of very on diary. And obviously his content's become immensely successful as well. And people really, really love his TikToks. And then you have Washington Post. Washington Post is actually Dave. But obviously Dave isn't on there as himself. He's on there as Washington Post because they gave him the free will, basically, to throw whatever idea and news sketch that he had at it and look at the success that it's had. He's only been able to achieve that because he had the freedom, the editorial freedom to do so. And he's been allowed access and help from other reporters in the team whenever there is a news story that they do want to generate sort of newsier content for. But his is a really, really clever TikTok strategy. He spends most of his videos doing newsy comedy sketches, which someone may be quick to criticize and say, oh, what value are these? Like, it's a newspaper, they're supposed to be telling people the news, and this is just some silly 15-second TikTok with no purpose. Well, actually, what if Dave got 30,000 followers from that one silly TikTok, and then the next TikTok he makes is like a really impactful news TikTok that does share information? That's what it's all about. It's about accumulating highly engaged followers who will then be around, they'll be there following you when you bring that newsier content to them. It's really smart. I don't know, I'm still flummoxed as to how many news providers are getting on TikTok and aren't basically copying Dave. You are seeing so many news providers get on TikTok, but they're like just trying to do what they've been doing on Instagram. And very few of them have gone over 100,000 followers even. And they have teams behind them. They're not like little old me who tries to squeeze it around my day job. Like, they have teams making content, and people really need to wake up and notice how well Dave has done, because he's been given the freedom and the scope to do something TikTok specific that is immensely respectful of the age demographic that he's trying to reach, Gen Z. Just quickly want to cover the reality of TikToking as a journalist. It's not all great or positive, or, you know, it does add an intense amount of work to my kind of daily output that I make. It's a minimum 2 to 3 hours a day. If you think about TikTok creation and ideation, in order to maintain relationships and build trust, I have to spend a lot of time. I say I have to, like, I do it out of pleasure, but I'm trying to explain how much time it actually takes. Going through and replying to everyone really does take a lot of time. And obviously it's additional screen time. And I guess right now we're all trying to think of healthy ways to be, but I've certainly noticed my screen time go up massively. If I'm after a certain story, I'm really mindful of the For You page, curating it to serve me this kind of content that I want. That takes time, and I've really suffered from loss of privacy in terms of, I get recognized in the street now probably once a fortnight. I never got recognized before from any of the work that I'd done. Also, I'm not someone who's on air much. I'm really at the bottom of the rung of the career ladder at the BBC. I'm not an on-air personality, and TikTok's kind of made me one. And what's happened is, there was even at one point where someone kind of followed me to my house. Nothing bad happened, but it was a bit of a moment where I thought, oh my goodness, okay, this is now the reality. I have to be careful maybe when I'm out. And I even get recognized if I've got my mask on, which is bonkers, but I think that's to do with my headbands. And then last but not least, I just wanted to leave everyone, as we go to questions, these are some comments that I've gotten over the year of being on TikTok. And I guess with these comments, I'm trying to show for anyone watching who is a keen tweeter, for example, you know, how many times do we get tweet replies that look like this? Not really. Like there's just something, like I said earlier, about the TikTok comments section that's really like followers, if they like your content, they become real cheerleaders. They're really supportive. They come back again and again. They message me on Instagram all the time. It's a real heartwarming community that I've got now. I know the regular people who respond to my content, and it's added really such pleasure to the journalism that I do. And it was all kind of a bit of an accident how it all came about. So I hope that was interesting. I think we're now ready. I'm ready to take on any questions that anybody may have, and I'll stop screen sharing as well.
Thank you so much, Sophia. This was utterly brilliant. So much fun to watch, almost as much fun as your TikTok videos. There are millions of questions. I had loads, but I'm going to jump straight in because there are so many. The first one, I'm going to just jump in with the difficult question from Ted Sullivan, which is really good stuff about TikTok. Can you tell us a little bit about what you think about the Chinese ownership of TikTok and whether you feel it kind of has any impact on the content or how materials are used?
So I would say anyone who's been on TikTok for over a year will tell you exactly the same thing, which is, I think the For You page has changed dramatically over the year because of the increased scrutiny that the app has faced. Take, for example, my story when I found that really dodgy trend on my For You page. That's happening increasingly less and less because their moderation strategies are tightening, and they're aware that everyone's there thinking, but you know, are they? Oh, how much involvement does the Chinese government have? But I go off what the tech experts say, who know far more than me, which is that it still remains the case that the CIA, when they did investigation, the UK government, none of them in any of their probing of the app found anything to be concerned about in terms of kind of data sharing and collection. That has, you know, it's not led to any removal of TikTok from app stores. And I would say personally, what I've seen happen as well is that it's kind of made some people scrutinize more like other platforms more as well. I think there is a lot of anti-Chinese xenophobia that's part of it too. And we're perhaps not as quick to challenge the data collection of Silicon Valley companies sometimes, when there's certainly a history of sort of malevolent data sharing there. So I think I'm going off of what the tech community is saying, which is that it remains that there's no evidence really that suggests I shouldn't be on there.
And there's nothing you've encountered as a journalist, and certainly on certain issues are framed on TikTok that are different how you think they'd be framed on other.
No, and especially after that one big story that there was, everyone, I'm sure you'll remember the girl who did like a makeup tutorial. I encounter, actually, probably because I follow quite a few now, but I encounter a lot of Uyghur Muslim content on TikTok from Uyghur Muslims in diaspora who are talking about what's happening in China. So that's what I mean. It's kind of, I think the app's cleaned itself up a bit.
Thank you very much. You mentioned engagement, and you mentioned kind of Dave's brilliant use of the Washington Post website. And you also talked a little bit about how you're baffled that other news organizations don't do this, and why don't they do, you know, basically why don't they copy Dave? Can you talk a little bit more about TikTok driving engagement, and particularly driving kind of paid engagement where it's relevant? Do you think it's something that, you know, that following someone, a news organization on TikTok is likely to lead to a kind of paid subscriber?
So I don't think, if this information is available, I've not come across it and I'd be keen to read it, but I don't think, for example, Washington Post have ever given figures or information as to how many of those TikTokers subscribe. And what I would say is my TikToking seems to have brought, certainly in terms of a feedback loop, I would never before have necessarily had many messages or interest, I think, in some of my stories from really young people. And I mean, now I very regularly will get messages about work that I've done, or people sharing work that I've done. And from a BBC World Service perspective, where like reach is really, really important to us, that's proven to be very helpful for me. What you're talking about is a challenge that news providers have faced with Instagram too.
Yeah.
And basically every single social media platform that is desperate to keep you in the app and doesn't want to release you. And TikTok's just part of that. TikTok isn't new. It's just doing exactly the same thing. And in terms of actually how BBC World Service tracks its audiences, our audiences on social media are part of our global reach when we take in those numbers. But for BBC Public Service, I believe it's not part of their reach. Yeah. So maybe news providers can think about what qualifies as reach and impact with viewers. It's different. Yeah. Public service broadcasting is different to like paid for subscriptions. But I think paid for subscriptions may possibly be pushed if you really develop personalities. People, if someone is desperate to if someone like really ardently follows someone on TikTok who has 1 million followers and also happens to be a Telegraph columnist, and you become just obsessed with every single piece of output that they make, maybe you will be persuaded to subscribe, pay for a subscription to the Telegraph. There's that route as well that I guess I perhaps haven't spoken as much about, but there are two ways that news providers really can think about getting journalists on TikTok, which is one, you make a news provider TikTok account, or you encourage your individual journalists to develop TikTok profiles. They're two very different things, and one involves way more involvement from the news provider than the other. But it may actually well be that if you encourage more individuals to get big on TikTok rather than the faceless newspaper, that may also be a way. What's clever about what Washington Post is that they've taken a faceless newspaper and they've given it a face.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll come back to that question of who should be on TikTok, on which journalists in a moment, but a question from Marcella that's kind of related to this about the time and the effort and what you use this for. This is Marcella Kunova, who runs journalism.co.uk. I'd like to get your thoughts on one problem I struggle with is how do you feel about putting so much of your time and talent into creating value for a company that not only doesn't pay you, but it can also wipe out your work at any moment? So the power balance is not in your favor here.
I've actually seen Dave get asked this question as well.
What was his answer?
He was kind of just like, oh yeah, they can wipe it out. Ooh. Whereas I think if I think a bit more deeply about it, I would say that if TikTok got wiped out tomorrow, I've still won. I still have hundreds of thousands of people now in the UK who know my work. Hundreds of thousands of people in America as well. They recognize my face. They're not going to forget who I am because they don't see my TikTok videos anymore. They will keep encountering my work. Many of them follow me now on Instagram and on Twitter. And in reporting on TikTok, it's accelerated my career way more than had I never gone on there. This year I've done a live on breakfast. I've been on BBC Women's Hour. Those things just wouldn't have happened to me so early on without TikTok. And if it disappeared tomorrow, I would simply take everything that I've learned from being on there and apply high content density and really clever content creation to everything else I do, which is kind of what I've already started doing.
Thank you. Good answer. Question from Ramisha Ali, who's one of our journalist fellows from Pakistan. And your TikTok account is very much your personal account rather than the BBC account. So you talked about the difference between content creators and influencers and how journalists are very definitely not influencers. But you must be contacted by many brands and outlets to give shout outs or make videos on paid content. How do you approach that? How do you deal with that?
Are there
Yeah,
ever cases where you think this might be worth doing because it's a good product or it's a good cause, for example?
I simply can't, because even though I am an independent content creator on TikTok, I'm still staff at the BBC. I can't take on opportunities like that. In the last week, I got 3 different companies, Babbel, Duolingo, and NatWest, all contact me wanting to pay me to put content on there. And I always just have to reply being like, I'm a BBC journalist, like, we can't do this kind of thing. I'm sure maybe if you've tried contacting BBC journalists before, they'll tell you exactly the same thing. But yes, I'm aware that other journalists with huge followings, which tend to be on Twitter rather than any other app, may not get influencer collab opportunities. But yeah, I am increasingly getting them, and on Instagram too. But I can't, even though I'm independent on there, I can't do them.
Thank you. And another question from another one of our journalists from Nicaragua, Malva, who we use Instagram Reels to promote some content, especially about sexual and reproductive rights. The visibility is more than our regular content, so we use the Reels instead of TikTok, however, because we found out that TikTok bans a lot of content we create, especially around abortion and women's rights. And have you had any similar experience?
This is a big area of interest for me. Like I was saying earlier about how much TikTok's been forced to clean up its moderation strategies because it's conscious of the scrutiny and criticism it's under, it sometimes gets a bit trigger happy with what it takes down, I think. Yeah. And it's doing that to keep people safe. But it's this really hard balance of it's trying to keep people safe, but ultimately if lots of people feel like their content is being wrongfully taken down and they're there trying to use the app as a place to advocate or to express themselves, especially with something it's sensitive like women's rights, where you're really trying to get content out there that can help people, it's infuriating to have your videos constantly put under review. Even in the story that I did about Jewish TikTokers who create content challenging anti-Semitism, sometimes even if you make a video that is criticizing and challenging anti-Semitism because you're referring to the anti-Semitic moment, the video may be removed because it features anti-Semitism, even though the video isn't an anti-Semitic video. So it's really, really tricky. However, I have to say that I do see plenty, I do see abortion, I see doctors educating about women's health, abortion, access to abortion, all of that on my For You page and when I look for it as well. So whenever you hear, and I got a lot of this when I was doing the US election documentary as well, you will hear basically every niche community or minority community or advocacy community on TikTok say, we're being suppressed, my videos are being taken down. Always interrogate it. In some cases, there may be work, investigation that needs to be done. But in lots of cases, it's actually the app kind of trigger happy, trying to make people safe because the machine learning sees something it's scared of and thinks, oh, this could offend people, takes it down. And then there aren't necessarily the human beings, the mechanisms in place to understand the content in its nuanced way and actually keep it on the app. So it's tricky.
And that's a wider question about machine learning and algorithms and who's programming it and which imagery is, and especially female imagery, which is often kind of programmed to be removed very quickly. Staying kind of with this and the slightly darker side of TikTok, and a question from Jenny Kangasniemi in Finland, who works for Helsingin Sanomat, the biggest newspaper there, and said our newspaper recently covered a story on children who shared diet tips on TikTok. And have you personally encountered this kind of very dark side of TikTok as a content creator? And how do you think journalists on TikTok should address it, or should they?
100%. I made a Twitter thread about it once, which got featured in a Dazed article piece. But TikTok's constantly battled a high amount of eating disorder content on the app, which is troubling enough when it is an Instagram still, and is even more troubling when it is someone in video telling you about what they're going through. And again, there is this nuanced dividing line between finding a community of like-minded people who can all support each other and triggering. And again, TikTok has done initiatives to try and improve body positivity content on there, and its moderation strategies around it. But I suspect it's something that may keep kind of reappearing.
I mean, as a journalist yourself, what are the biggest kind of ethical dilemmas you face when using this platform to tell stories or to gather stories? This is a question from Markalu in Kenya, where, you know, Kenyan journalists have had a very different experience of social media and how it's been used to incite, you know, violence around elections. But basically, are there kind of any ethical dilemmas you face, and also journalistic standards that you feel you've got to make careful decisions of, you know, high engagement, quality, speed, accessibility?
I think, obviously, I mean, given the last question, you've got to be really careful when you approach people on TikTok, because you don't necessarily always know how old they are. They may be, if they're not, you know, under 18, they're pretty close to it, and they may be in a vulnerable situation. So you've got to just think about all of the ethics that apply to you when you find people on other social media, like you've been doing already for ages on Instagram and Twitter. Ethically, it's hard. I mean, especially in the US election, like I had this big content creator who was one of the creators who'd been paid to make political content. So he had broken the rules. But he made a TikTok being like, they've taken my video down. There's this BBC piece saying I've broken the rules, blah, 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 blah. And obviously loads of his followers were like, oh my God, yeah, that's so bad. And gratefully, a number of other big content creators were commenting being like, nah, you actually broke the rules, and that what you're facing now are the consequences of breaking the rules. And I have no problem getting in the comments and saying, hi, thank you for your video. Actually, this is the case, blah, blah, blah. Thank you, have a nice day.
And that's possible.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily, and every now and again, yeah, I don't, off the top of my head, I can't really think of any moments where I have these sort of huge moral quandaries as to how to behave, per se, on TikTok. But certainly if I get comments that are racist or mean-spirited, I have no qualms about replying and telling them that I'm blocking them, or that I'm reporting what they've said, or I've told them that their comments like that have no place on TikTok and that they should stop following me. And I do get stuff like that sometimes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Talking about age for a bit, you've spoken a great deal about TikTok and youth audiences, and a few people in the audience are asking about older audiences. Adele Santelli from Brazil is asking, do you think TikTok is a possibility for reaching older audiences? Is there a way of reaching older audiences? Is it different type of content? Is it different? And also crucially, from the other end, do you think older journalists can or should engage in TikTok as well? Or is this something really best left to the younger generation?
I don't know how old Max Foster is, but we are certainly not the same age.
No.
So that answers one question.
Well, not necessarily. You could say he really should be hanging up his TikTok.
Oh, no, he shouldn't. He should be on there. 100%.
Yeah.
There are plenty of people I follow who are above 60, 70 years old, who make excellent content. Not necessarily journalists, but they make great educational content, which is a space that journalists can get involved in. And what your other question was, the type of video that you make isn't any different.
Yeah.
No.
So I suppose what I'm asking is, why is it so appealing to under 21s? And is there something different that makes it appealing to those over 30?
The trends and the culture on there are innate to that generation. Take me, for example. So I'm 26. I guess I'm skirting towards the slightly older young demographic on there. If we divide between 10 to 19 and 20 to 29, obviously I'm in the second one, but they're the two biggest demographics that are on TikTok. I don't own a TV. I don't watch TV. I will watch Netflix on my computer, or my phone. I don't take part in appointment viewing. I don't consume linear broadcasting, as it were. Everything I consume is podcast or as and when I want it on my phone. TikTok perfectly slips into that consumption style. It's become another app in the ecosystem of social apps that I check on an hourly basis as to what's going on. It has seamlessly folded into the screen time that we partake in. And social media video is all about high content density, and no app does that better than TikTok. Yeah. So it makes sense that we gravitate there. And secondly, that there's no other platform that catapults you to your community so quickly as TikTok does. So if I take, for example, imagine I was 18 years old studying, and I was about to go to uni to study history. And I was fascinated by History Talk, which is the TikTok world of people who share historical facts and historical stories. I go on TikTok, I follow a couple of people that a mate of mine's recommended, and then I start watching this really, really cool creator who's made 5 videos on this specific niche area of Elizabethan history that I'm fascinated by. I watch all of them. Then I go back on the For You page. The For You page starts giving me other videos. Perhaps there'll be Elizabethan history. Maybe there'll be Tudor history. Maybe, oh, now I'm learning about history in the Philippines. That's cool. I don't really know much about history in the Philippines. And then it keeps you in your area of interest, but it brings you more content relevant to it. And so there's just, and it gives you the app's best content that's on there at that moment. So the quality of it's phenomenal. So it just keeps you in there, and you find your tribe, you find your people. You get to know these familiar faces, you reply to them, then you might be galvanized to make your own content, and then they start finding yours, and this whole community rallies around. And my generation, we're used to finding more fulfilling communities online often than we are in real life. That's how we connect.
I mean, you're kind of the For You page in particular. If I ask this question from Alex Goldsmith, what methods do you use to curate your own For You page? How much
you just watch, you look for and you watch.
Right.
So when I was doing the TikTok documentary, I found a few. I started. I like searched for the political hype houses, watched loads of their content. And then the For You page starts recommending me content from other political users. Like, it happens really quickly. So you kind of have to go looking for it yourself a little bit. And then as soon as it starts coming to you, you have to engage with the video, you like it, you might comment it, or you make sure you watch it, maybe rewatch it, and also add it to your favorites.
So you kind of curate it through your actions.
Yeah, it's all through your engagement. You need to tell the app what you want to see.
Thank you. If that answers the question, Alex. We're running out of time, but a couple of last questions. You're in a kind of fairly unique place in that you are a kind of staff BBC correspondent, as well as kind of have a tremendous personal brand on social media. And a question from Christine Francisca, who's an Indonesian journalist who's doing a lot on kind of lock screen journalism. As a journalist in social media, you usually you're representing the media that you work with. And is it hard maintaining your own personal perspective and content on one brand while maintaining the impartiality and balance that the BBC requires elsewhere? And crucially, have you bumped up to it against this on TikTok at all? Has there been times you think, I would really like to do this story, but I can't, or I can't do it in the way I'd like to do it because it would be at odds with my day job?
I've got to say, like, I'm lucky that there are some issues that I may personally feel strongly about, but I'm generally quite apolitical. So I find it quite easy to be editorially impartial because I'm not there bubbling, desperate to like share my anger or pleasure at policy. But I go on TikTok to talk about English words that are derived from Arabic, or I'm sharing a documentary that I have made for the BBC, or I am singing a song that I have grown up singing because it's a song that's really important to my nonna. It's really easy to make that content without endangering my editorial impartiality, because I'm sharing information, amusing, interesting content. And I always go back to something that I read that Jeremy Vine once said, which is that the BBC, we're not allowed views, but we're allowed values. And I'm not sharing my views every day. I don't find that remotely a problem. I don't spend much time kind of tiptoeing around that, maybe very rarely. But otherwise, the kind of content I make, I'm not going on there talking about the daily political news. I think if I did, I would certainly have to think about it more. But because I'm not making that kind of content, I don't really have to think about it in that way. And sharing things about my personal life. I mean, part of the title for today's talk is how to build trust. Like, I really think in sharing elements of my passions and my interests, showing that I'm not just like a kind of sterile reporter, has added value to my journalism. It's not endangered its impartiality.
I mean, you've talked about kind of the loss of privacy that comes with having this TikTok profile, but have you ever experienced anything nastier or more unpleasant, kind of the real online abuse and trolling? And if so, firstly, how do you deal with it? And do you get support from anyone, either your employers or TikTok or anyone over it?
I don't get trolled because, again, I don't make that kind of content that I think inflames that. I think that could change. I think that will change.
Because I'd argue it's not really about content. It's often just about being female and in a public space.
I was going to say the biggest challenge I face is, I wouldn't even call it daily. It's possibly hourly. But I mean, the constant sexualization of the content that I create and the DMs that I get, is pretty intense. I mean, I don't really know if there's anything an employer can do about that.
What do you do about it?
Frankly, I'm really used to it. And there are times when it really bothers me, but most of the time, I'm just, like, I think in general, I am pretty self-confident. And I just think, I can't let this bother me. I've got better things to do. And I just ignore it. I ignore them. But even like, I just get people asking me all the time if I'm married as well, which I know is kind of harmless, but it's also not totally harmless. And even this morning, I've replied to one of them. Why? Because I just want to know what it is that they want to get out of it. But most of the time, I completely ignore it. And it's to anyone who does think that they want to DM a female journalist anything of a romantic or sexual nature, don't.
Yeah. That's possibly general advice. Just don't. You know, I think it's just one question I always ask female journalists at any high profile, and it's always spectacularly depressing how so run of the mill it is that people don't bother even registering it as something worth mentioning. But it's yeah,
and I think obviously if I was some like high-flying BBC correspondent, maybe I would get like cabs paid for. I don't really know, but as I said, I'm Band C. I'm run of the mill, pretty low down, and I have to, you know, I will walk around and use public transport, and I get recognized a lot of the time. And like I said, at one point, it meant that someone followed me into my road.
Sophia, thank you so much for this talk, for your honesty, for your openness, your thoughtfulness as well, and for your courage in, you know, going into a new space, making it work for you as a journalist, making it work for your career and for building your brand on it. It's been terrific to see, and I really can't wait to see what you do next. And also can't wait to see the book that we will have details of later coming out as well. Can't wait to hear about all that. Thank you so much for your time. Next week, we had invited Hopewell Chinono, the Zimbabwean journalist, to speak on press freedom. But rather ironically, he has been arrested again for sharing a tweet. He's applied for bail again this morning, so he may be able to join us. But if not, we've invited his friend and freedom expressionist activist, Sitsini Dangerama, as well as Hopewell's legal team to explain what is happening. So either way, we will be talking about Zimbabwe and press freedom there. So we really hope to see you then. In the meantime, thank you again, Sophia, and thank you everyone for joining.